Everyone thought Maplewood Heights was safe. No locked doors, no fear, no crime. Then, women started disappearing, without screams, without struggle, without witnesses. Police searched for an outsider, a stranger, a monster. They were wrong, because the killer didn't break in. He was invited. And the most terrifying part? You've probably trusted someone just like him.
Right before we dive in, just a small ask. If you enjoy this kind of storytelling, subscribe and like the video. It helps me keep creating more for you.
Maplewood Heights looked like the kind of place people trusted without thinking about it. The streets curved gently instead of running straight, designed to slow traffic and make everything feel calm. Lawns were trimmed evenly, hedges shaped with care, and porches decorated with the same seasonal touches year after year. In the evenings, porch lights glowed soft yellow, not bright enough to expose anything, just warm enough to feel safe. It was the kind of suburb real estate agents described as ideal for families, and for years no one argued with that description. People in Maplewood Heights believed crime happened somewhere else, downtown, across the highway, in places where buildings were older and people didn't know their neighbors' names. Here, neighbors waved, they borrowed sugar, they watched each other's houses during vacations. Trust wasn't earned in Maplewood Heights, it was assumed. That assumption would become the most dangerous thing about the town. The first disappearance didn't feel like the beginning of anything. Emily Carter went missing on a Thursday morning in early spring, the kind of morning that felt almost too normal. The air was cool but gentle, the sky clear, the sidewalks still damp from overnight sprinklers. Emily kissed her husband goodbye, tied her running shoes, and stepped out the front door. A neighbor saw her jog past the mailbox, earbuds in, ponytail swinging lightly behind her. Nothing about that moment suggested it would be the last time anyone saw her. When Emily didn't return home, her husband waited. Then he worried. Then he called the police. Officers arrived calmly, asking standard questions, glancing around a house that showed no signs of disturbance. Emily's phone was gone, her car sat untouched in the driveway. There was no blood, no broken door, no evidence of a struggle. By the end of the first day, people were already offering explanations that felt easier than fear. Maybe she twisted an ankle and got help somewhere. Maybe she ran into someone she knew. Maybe she needed space. Maplewood Heights had never trained its residents to think beyond maybes. Search teams combed nearby trails and wooded patches. Dogs followed scents that faded into nothing. After a week, concerns softened into uncertainty. After 2 weeks, uncertainty turned into quiet discomfort. Emily's photo remained on the community bulletin board, slowly blending into the background of flyers and notices no one really read anymore. Life resumed its routines, because routines are powerful things. They convince people that normal will always return if they keep acting like it never left. 6 weeks later, Rachel Monroe disappeared. This time, the pattern was harder to ignore, though many tried. Rachel was younger, single, and lived only 3 streets away from Emily. She was last seen early in the morning leaving her house for a showing she never arrived at. Her phone was found inside her home, charging on the kitchen counter. Her car was parked neatly in the driveway. Again, no signs of force. Again, no witnesses. The police asked the same questions and received the same empty answers. Still, they stopped short of using the word everyone was thinking but no one wanted to say out loud. Serial. The neighborhood changed in subtle ways after Rachel vanished. Joggers removed their earbuds. Parents began walking their children to school instead of watching from the porch. Garage doors closed more quickly. Curtains stayed drawn longer into the evening. Fear didn't arrive as panic, it arrived as adjustment. Maplewood Heights adapted without admitting why it needed to. The third disappearance shattered whatever comfort remained. Sarah Klein was 35, a nurse and a mother of 2. She vanished in the middle of the afternoon while unloading groceries. A neighbor later recalled hearing nothing unusual. No raised voices, no crash, no scream. Sarah's children came home from school to find grocery bags on the kitchen floor, frozen food melting slowly onto tile. The house felt wrong in a way children instinctively understand before adults do. That night, the police lights flashing across Sarah's driveway felt different, louder, more permanent. 3 women, 1 suburb, no clear suspect. That was when Detective Laura Mitchell was brought in from the county. She didn't arrive with dramatic statements or promises. She walked the streets slowly, noticing details residents had trained themselves to overlook. Houses built close enough to observe routines, but far enough to avoid involvement. Security cameras angled inward toward driveways and front doors, not outward toward the street. Everyone was watching their own space. No one was watching the bigger picture. Mitchell noticed something else too. The disappearances didn't involve forced entry. Doors weren't broken, windows weren't shattered. Whatever happened, it happened quietly, willingly at least at first. That realization set heavy in her chest because it narrowed the possibilities in a way most people wouldn't like. Town meetings grew tense. Faces that once smiled easily now scanned rooms carefully. People whispered names and pretended they weren't. Suspicion became a shared secret, passed silently between neighbors who had once trusted each other without question. Everyone wanted the answer to be simple. Everyone wanted the danger to come from outside. But Mitchell knew better. Whoever was responsible didn't stand out. He didn't rush. He didn't force his way in. He understood routines because he lived among them. He understood trust because it was given to him freely. Maplewood Heights hadn't been invaded. It had been observed. And while the town searched for something that looked like a monster, the real threat continued its day like nothing had changed, blending in, watching, waiting. By the time Maplewood Heights realized what kind of story it was living inside, the ending had already started writing itself.
The discovery of the first body came quietly, almost disrespectfully, as if the town itself was ashamed of what it had been hiding. A dog walker found the remains early one morning in a narrow stretch of woodland that separated Maplewood Heights from an older, half-forgotten housing development. The area wasn't remote, just ignored. One of those places people passed every day without really seeing. The body had been carefully concealed, wrapped in plastic and weighed down with stones, positioned in a way that suggested patience rather than panic. Detective Laura Mitchell knew immediately that this was not the work of someone acting on impulse. The victim was Emily Carter. The medical examiner's report stripped away the last layer of denial. Emily hadn't died during a struggle. There were no defensive wounds, no broken bones beyond what had occurred after death. She had been drugged, rendered unconscious before she ever realized she was in danger. The cause of death was controlled and deliberate. This wasn't a crime of rage. It was a process. Someone had planned this, rehearsed it, refined it. Word spread faster than the police could contain it. Maplewood Heights woke up to a truth it could no longer avoid. This wasn't a series of disappearances. It was a serial killing. Fear no longer crept. It moved in. Parents stopped letting children play outside alone. Evening walks disappeared. Neighborhood barbecues were canceled without explanation. Every unfamiliar car became suspicious. Every familiar face felt uncertain. Trust, once the foundation of Maplewood Heights, collapsed under the weight of its own naivete. Detective Mitchell expanded the investigation, building a profile that painted an unsettling picture. The killer targeted women within a narrow age range, all living alone or temporarily separated from their families during predictable hours of the day. Each victim followed a routine, and each routine had been studied. This was someone who paid attention, someone patient enough to wait, someone close enough to observe without drawing notice. Rachel Monroe's body was found 2 weeks later, less than a mile from where Emily had been buried. Like Emily, she'd been drugged. Like Emily, there were no signs of resistance. The similarities were impossible to ignore. The killer wasn't improvising, he was repeating a method that worked. Sarah Klein remained missing, but Mitchell no longer believed it was a question of if her body would be found, only when. As pressure mounted, the police canvassed the neighborhood again, this time with sharper questions and less tolerance for polite evasion. They asked about repairmen, delivery drivers, service workers, anyone who had legitimate reasons to approach homes during the day. They collected security footage, doorbell recordings, partial glimpses of strangers walking past lawns and driveways. The problem wasn't a lack of faces, it was too many. Maplewood Heights had been built for convenience. Landscapers moved freely. Maintenance workers blended in. Neighbors held doors open for each other without thinking twice. The killer didn't need to break in. He only needed to ask. Paranoia fractured the community. Accusations surfaced quietly at first, then openly. A single father was questioned because he lived near all 3 victims. A delivery driver was reported because someone thought his route felt off. Longtime neighbors avoided eye contact, unsure whether friendliness itself had become a liability. The killer didn't just take lives, he poisoned relationships, turning proximity into suspicion. Mitchell noticed something that didn't fit the panic. While fear spread, one pattern remained consistent. Certain houses were never targeted. Certain routines were never interrupted. It suggested familiarity, someone who didn't need to guess which homes were vulnerable because he already knew, someone who understood which doors would open without resistance. The break came from an unexpected place. A teenage boy, riding his bike home early from school, mentioned seeing a woman talking to a man near her driveway weeks earlier. Nothing alarming, he said, just conversation. The man wore casual clothes, carried himself confidently like he belonged there. The boy hadn't thought to mention it before because nothing seemed wrong. That detail haunted Mitchell. Killers who force their way in leave chaos behind. Killers who are invited leave almost nothing. As Mitchell re-examined timelines, she realized the encounters likely began with trust, a friendly introduction, a request for help, a moment where politeness overrode instinct. The killer didn't threaten, he didn't rush, he waited for permission, because permission was the strongest weapon Maplewood Heights had ever handed anyone. Sarah Klein's body was found 3 days later in a drainage culvert hidden behind a line of trees bordering the suburb. Like the others, she'd been drugged. Like the others, there were no signs of resistance. By then, the pattern was undeniable, and the fear had become something heavier than panic. It was betrayal. The realization settled slowly and painfully across Maplewood Heights. The danger was not lurking outside the neighborhood. It was already inside. And whoever he was still free.
By the time Sarah Klein's body was identified, Maplewood Heights had stopped pretending. Police cars became a permanent fixture at the entrance of the neighborhood. News vans lined the streets every morning, their satellite dishes pointed like accusing fingers at rows of identical houses. The suburb that once prided itself on privacy was now an open wound, examined daily by strangers hungry for answers. Detective Laura Mitchell no longer slept more than a few hours a night. The case had consumed her, not because it was complicated, but because it was painfully simple. The killer hadn't relied on clever tricks or elaborate cover-ups. He had relied on something far more reliable: human behavior. Trust. Mitchell focused her attention inward, not on outsiders, not on passing workers, but on people who belonged, homeowners, residents, people whose presence never raised alarms. When she overlaid the victims' schedules with neighborhood routines, one name appeared again and again, never directly connected, yet always nearby: Ethan Rowe. Ethan was the kind of man no one remembered clearly, even after years of living next door. Early 40s, divorced, worked from home as a logistics consultant, according to public records. Friendly, but not intrusive. He waved. He helped shovel snow. He collected packages for neighbors when they were away. The kind of man people described as nice without being able to explain why. He had spoken to all 3 victims within weeks of their disappearances. Not formally, not suspiciously, just conversations. Casual encounters near driveways, mailboxes, sidewalks. Nothing that would have stood out at the time. Everything that stood out in hindsight. Mitchell requested a warrant quietly, knowing that a misstep could send him disappearing just like the women he'd taken. Inside Ethan's house, everything was immaculate. Too immaculate. No personal clutter, no photos beyond generic landscapes. The basement, however, told a different story. Hidden behind a false wall were sealed containers, clean, organized, labeled with dates and initials. Inside them were items that once belonged to the victims: jewelry, phones, hair ties. Mundane objects stripped of context, preserved not as trophies of violence, but of control. There were also medical-grade sedatives, legally obtained through forged prescriptions, carefully dosed. Ethan was arrested without resistance. At the station, he didn't ask for a lawyer right away. He didn't cry. He didn't deny anything. He spoke calmly, as if discussing a misunderstanding that could be cleared up with enough patience. When Mitchell asked him why, he tilted his head slightly, almost curious at the question. "They trusted me," he said. "I never forced anything." That was the most disturbing part. Ethan explained, not with pride but with certainty, that Maplewood Heights had been perfect for him. People here believed bad things happened elsewhere. They believed violence required visible warning signs. They believed monsters announced themselves. He had learned quickly that all he needed to do was blend in, mirror politeness, offer help. A broken sprinkler, a package delivered to the wrong house, a simple conversation that lowered defenses just enough. He didn't see himself as cruel. He saw himself as inevitable. The trial shattered whatever illusion of safety the suburb still clung to. Every testimony rewrote memories. Friendly gestures now reframed as reconnaissance, smiles recast as rehearsals. The community realized that nothing had been wrong with their locks or alarms. What had been wrong was their certainty. Ethan Rowe was sentenced to life without parole. The headlines moved on within weeks. The cameras left. The news vans disappeared. Maplewood Heights tried to return to normal, but normal no longer existed. Houses were sold, families relocated, new residents arrived unaware of the quiet history beneath manicured lawns. The streetlights still came on at dusk. The sidewalks remained clean. Children eventually played outside again, though parents watched more closely now. Detective Laura Mitchell drove through the neighborhood one final time before closing the case file. Everything looked the same, and that was the lesson she couldn't escape. Evil didn't need darkness. It didn't need isolation. It only needed a place where no one believed it could exist. Maplewood Heights had been perfect. That was why it worked.
Thanks for listening. If you want more cases from my old files, like the video and subscribe. There's plenty left in the casebook.